Welcome to another morning episode of Liberty Dad Podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. If you're tuning in live, then I especially thank you for giving me your time so early. This morning, let's talk memes, education, and throw in a bill review. So let's get started. All right, folks. So last week I came across a meme and I found it a little bit intriguing. And I did a little bit of research and found out that the meme is a little bit misleading. So let's go ahead and put that meme up on the screen and we'll take a look here. All right. So there we are. And what this is showing is this is the governor of Oregon, and she has got the backdrop of children behind her. And the meme says, New Oregon law removes reading, writing, and math requirements to help students of color. You can see my little buddy back behind me here. All right. So I was kind of interested. I was like, well, did they really remove these requirements? And like, are they trying to help students of color? So a little bit of research, and I found out a few interesting things. So the first thing, let's just tackle this and get this right out of the way. So we're going to share this next screen here. And let's make it a little bit bigger so that you can kind of see what's going on here. So, what you see here is where the picture actually came from. And as you can see, it says that the Oregon Governor Kate Brown signs strong climate executive order. And you can see that is the same photo as in the meme. All right, let's go back to that meme really quickly and we'll take a good look at that. So, pull that up right there. All right. So you can see that is the same photo. So a little bit misleading there. And the reason for this is that the actual bill, which was not signed in 2023, and we're going to get to that bill in just a moment. This is the bill is SB 744. So we're going to get to that, and we'll kind of look at that in just a moment here. But the actual bill was signed in 2021. So initially when I saw the meme, I thought it was something that happened recently, and if you look around, if you kind of dig in a little bit, you'll see that other people have kind of commented on this same issue here, and it appears that the bill, it was signed this year, but it actually was not. So now now that we've kind of identified, like, hey, this meme is actually not accurate, and that's okay. Like, memes don't have to be accurate. I mean, they're meant to be a bit funny, to kind of make a point. So the accuracy isn't entirely necessary. It's okay to have the wrong photo, if you will, especially in this particular case, because she didn't actually do this as a public endeavor. Okay. So there wasn't a signing for them to have a picture of. However, I do think that the text is not only misleading, but actually quite inaccurate. Because what it says here, again, is that the law removes the reading, writing, and math requirements to help students of color. So at the actual let's look at an actual AP article from when this bill was signed. So we're looking at the AP article here. And what we see is that it says new Oregon law suspends graduation testing requirement. Okay. So let's take a look here. It says a new Oregon law, and this was back in August of 2021, a new Oregon law that suspends a requirement for a basic skills test in math, reading, and writing to graduate high school is being praised by advocates as a way to rethink education standards, and it's being sharply criticized by others as a misguided effort that will hurt children learning in the long run. Okay, so now what are we doing here? We're having the same argument that we always have. And that argument is, how should the education system play out? Like, what things should the education system do for students. And there's been this long running argument over whether or not the current education system is serving certain minority groups. And when people say minority groups, we can be honest that most of the time, what they're really talking about are young Black children. Okay. So let's just stop pretending that most people are talking about son, son. Goodness, when you're Liberty Dad, you never know what could happen. So we gonna have to work on that. All right. Anyway, so what I was saying is when people talk about education system not, failing students, they're almost always talking about Black children. They'll say minority children, and sometimes they do talk about others. They'll talk about maybe Hispanic children as well. The Hispanic community, and then oftentimes they'll also talk about Native Americans. But most of the time, they are specifically talking about Black students. So in this bill, they've actually suspended the requirement for basic skills in math, reading, and writing. And that is actually something that's very specific. In Oregon, they have something called essential skills. And what they did was they suspended it for 3 years. So let's go ahead and pull up this Senate bill here and take a look at it. We're not going to read through the whole bill. Okay. First of all, I am not a lawyer, so I'm just giving a plain reading. And the reason that I like to do these bill reviews is because you can actually learn a lot from a plain reading. And sometimes I found years ago, here's what kind of started this. Years ago, I would read a news article and it would say, this bill does this thing. And I would say, oh, wow, that's interesting. And then one day I just happened to look up the bill and I read it for myself. And I said, well, wait a minute. What was reported is not my reading of the bill, not entirely. But then I started reading bills a little bit more often. And I started finding out that sometimes when you read a news article, it will accurately describe the bill. Sometimes it kind of is a bit misleading. Maybe they focus on a particular element that they like or don't like. And then other times it's just wildly wrong. So I decided from now on, I'm going to try to read some of these bills before I decide to oppose it or support it. So let's go ahead and pull that bill up on the screen. We'll take a look at some of the more important parts of it because, again, bills can be boring and dry, and sometimes they can be very, very long. And one of the things that we don't want to do is we don't want to spend time on this podcast just literally reading a whole bill, especially if it's a really long bill. So what we want to do is kind of cut to the chase to the best of our ability and read the bill, at least in part, and then show you that it's actually not that difficult in many cases to read a bill. Now, sometimes it is difficult because the bill may make amendments to other existing statutes, and then you have to read those to get the better context. But overall, when you read a bill, you can actually learn quite a bit. You don't necessarily need to be a lawyer. Let's put that up on the screen. All right. And here it is. There we go. Perfect. All right. So this is Senate Bill 744. Now, remember, it was signed in 2021. So let's take a look. I've highlighted some areas that I think are relatively important. I will put all the links to everything in the show notes so that you can go if you want and just take a look and say, hey, DL, I think you got it right. Or no, you got it wrong. Here's where, I think you were misled. So we're going through it. And in section one, part one, I'm sorry, part two, it says the Department of Education shall, and then here's subsection A, review state requirements for high school diploma options offered in the state. So the first and foremost thing, they're going to be reviewing the requirements. Okay, then we move on to B, and it said review state requirements related to demonstrations of proficiency in skills or academic content areas that are not related to career and technical education, with an emphasis on demonstrations of proficiency in essential learning skills. And you can see that essential learning skills here has capitalized each the first letter of each word. So this if you're good at reading, right? If you understand how to properly read, this tells me initially immediately that there is something very specific here. This is a proper noun. So we'll get to that in a moment because I did find those and we can take a look at those. But this is the crux of the meme where I said, hey, it's a little bit inaccurate because they're not suspending the teaching of these things. What they're doing is they're suspending the testing for this. So the way that it works, from what I could tell in Oregon, what they do is they have a proficiency test that goes over these essential learning skills. And in 2021, this bill suspends that testing. It's a testing requirement that must be passed in order for a student to graduate high school. So they're just suspending a test that says, hey, can you demonstrate these essential learning skills? So we scroll down a little bit more here and we go down to another section. And so it says, when conducting the review and developing recommendations under this section. And what's going on here is they're suspending it and then saying, we need to review what we're up to because we've got problems. So it says, use a transparent process that is equitable, accessible, and inclusive. So I find this kind of interesting because they're reviewing and they're using, they're including this idea of equity and accessibility and inclusivity in the review. Okay. I don't quite understand how these things contribute to a proper review. You simply review something and you say, is this meeting the necessary needs? Is it not? The process in reviewing itself doesn't need to be equitable. And I don't know who it's going to be accessible for. And it doesn't need to be inclusive. Now, the results you might determine, hey, after we've reviewed, you might say, well, the system that we have lacks equity, lacks inclusivity, and we need to change that. But the process itself, to me, doesn't seem to need those particular things. Anyway, moving on. So then it says representatives from historically underserved students, including students who, and then we're going to jump down here to what is important for the meme, are from racial or ethnic groups that have historically experienced academic disparities. And so then it goes on further and further. And at the very bottom here, we can see in section 3, it says, notwithstanding any rules adopted by the State Board of Education, a student may not be required to show proficiency in essential learning skills as a condition of receiving a high school diploma during the 2021, 2022, and then the 2023, and then going on to 2024 school years. Yes, little buddy. Okay, you do that. All right. So what they've done is they've suspended the proficiency testing for the essential learning skills. Now, let's move on and see what these essential skills look like. So I'll pull that up on the screen here so that everybody can see it. Share this screen. All right. And that looks good. I think I can make that just a little bit bigger. And there we go. I think that works. Take a look. Yeah. That's let me move it over just a wee bit. Want to make sure that everybody can read it. All right, perfect. So, essential skills definition, this very first paragraph, the essential skills are valuable process skills for preparing Oregon students to meet their post secondary goals. These skills cut across academic disciplines and are embedded in the content standards. The skills are not intended to be content specific, but rather to be applied in a variety of courses, subjects, and settings. The following are the 9 essential skills as defined by the State Board of Education. So basically, folks, what we're looking at here is they've just said, all right, here's some broad skills that are necessary in order for you to move on from high school. So let's just, I'm not going to read everything. I'm just going to read each one individually, what they are, what these 9 are. So the first one, read and comprehend a variety of texts. Okay, good. Number 2, write clearly and accurately. Good. Apply mathematics in a variety of settings. Awesome. Number 4, listen actively and speak clearly and coherently. Agreed. Number 5, think critically and analytically. Okay, I like that one. I'm not really going to go into any criticism of them. I do think that this one is a little bit more subjective. What does it mean to think critically and analytically? Because honestly, I've met a lot of people who are graduates of college And I'm not so sure that they actually have acquired skills to think critically and analytically, but I do like the idea of it. This one is another subjective one. Use technology to learn, live, and work. Now, I don't really know how do you identify whether someone's using technology to live? I suppose that means, hey, can you find a website and can you go and fill out, say, a job application, or can you, when you're getting ready to go to the doctor's office, can you log in and put all your information in? I assume that's kind of what they're driving at. Learning is another good one. Like, could you pull up YouTube and and find a video and learn how to do a new skill? And then of course, can you work? That's a relatively important one. But I think that the younger generation coming up, I think that this one is, of all of these, probably the easiest one, because so much of our technology is around us for all sorts of things. I mean, you want to watch Netflix, you need to know how to use technology. You want to get on and watch some YouTube videos, again, technology. So I'm not sure that this one is a big necessity. But we'll move down, and we've got demonstrate civic and community engagement. I kind of like this one, but again, we're talking about high school students. So the question is, like, how do you demonstrate your engagement? I guess if you can say, "Hey, I've participated in these particular groups in my local community." Now, I'm not particularly a fan of this one for schools. I think it's a good thing, but I'm not so sure that it's a good thing for schools, simply because demonstrating civic and community engagement, there are a lot of people that don't, and they survive just fine. They're very happy to. A lot of people, they show up at the polls, every 4 years to vote for the president, and otherwise they're fine. Now, we may disagree with how, their engagement, and say, hey, they should be engaged more. And I think so, but I'm not sure that this one is necessary to demonstrate, for passing high school. Because for me, when I look at high school, I say, look, you need to learn the basic skills. You need to learn how to read, write, and do math and communicate. Like, these are things I think that are fundamental. And then if you want to graduate high school and then just get up and go to work every day, enjoy your weekends, and never participate in civic engagement, well, you're more than welcome to do that. All right, moving on. Demonstrate global literacy. Not so sure that this is necessary. I mean, it's a nice thing. Don't get me wrong. Demonstrating your knowledge of diverse cultural, linguistic, and artistic expressions. That's a good thing. But I don't know that it's necessary. It's an essential skill that's necessary for someone to graduate, right? Like, when I graduated, I can tell you right now that my knowledge of diverse cultural, linguistic, and artistic expressions. I don't know why I keep saying impressions, was not very high. However, as I went about in the world, went on vacations, visited other countries, met people from other countries, then my global literacy, if you will, actually started increasing. So I'm not sure that this is necessary for high school. And then this last one here, whoops, demonstrate personal management and teamwork skills. I think this is actually a good one. We all probably, anybody that's ever been to college, and maybe even high school, we remember being on a team, and the team had a project, and everybody in the team got their work, and then there was that one person who either didn't really do their job and other team members had to make up for their slack, or they did it, but they did it so poorly that they might as well not have done it. So I think this is good, just because once you get out in the real world, you are going to have to engage in some personal management, and you definitely are going to need teamwork skills. So that's what we've got going on here with this bill, with the essential skills list. So you've got 9 essential skills that Oregon has said, and this is longstanding, 9 essential skills that Oregon says you need to test proficiently in order to graduate high school. And then in 2021, this this bill suspends that requirement to demonstrate through a testing process. And of course, schools have long had this issue where people say, hey, testing is no good, testing is great. So this is a big fight. Now, here's the big question. You know what? I just noticed the show starts soon. No, the show has been started. I'm going to have to take that little banner off. Let's go ahead and put that one up. How about that? It's tough being a one man band here. At any rate, so when it comes to education, one of the big arguments that we have is always, always funding. And this kind of plays a role into this meme. And for anybody that may be just tuning in, let me go ahead and put that meme back up on the screen so that we can see it. So, this is the meme that kind of inspired this episode. This new Oregon law removes reading, writing, and math requirements to help students of color. And you can, if you're just tuning in, you can go back and listen to the very beginning where I highlight that one, this picture is actually a picture of something else where she signed in some climate legislation, the governor of Oregon. And then what this bill actually does is it removes the requirement to demonstrate your proficiency in these particular areas, specifically the 9 essential skills that is defined by the Oregon uh, Board of Education. So, at any rate, getting back to where we were, the issue that we have with education is always about funding, and there's an argument that says, "Hey, minority students, the underfunding of schools is detrimental to them." And we can look and we can see that there are educational gaps. Now, I want to point out that I disagree with that. And one of my favorite economists of all time, Thomas Sowell, has done some research. There is a school or was a school named M Street School. It operated for roughly 80 years at a really high academic rate. And what that means is it was a school primarily for, or no, not primarily, exclusively for black students. And it was chronically underfunded for the it's existed longer than 80 years, but there was an 80-year period where this school produced quality results. Now, I know some people say, well, it's Thomas Sowell, like, he's blah, blah, blah. So let's take a look at something that's not Thomas Sowell. So let's pull up little thing here on this page. All right. So there we go. So this is the Wikipedia entry for M Street High School. And we can see that M Street High School, also known as Perry School, because it went through some name changes, is a historic former school building located in the northwest quadrant of Washington, D.C. It has been listed on the District of Columbia Inventory of Historic Sites since 1978, the year I was born, and it was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1986. The building escaped demolition with community support and the efforts of preservationists and is now a community center. So, what's interesting about this school is if you do the research, and I encourage you to just go to Google, type in M Street High School, and then type Thomas Solon. And he's got a couple articles out there. You can read them. They're very in depth. He goes over all the statistics and the data of these students. But what I want to point out is down here. This is again from Wikipedia. So I'm not just picking out my favorite economist who's saying exactly what I want him to say. And down here, what I've got highlighted, it says it was one of the nation's first high schools for African Americans and represents an important development of Washington's education system. The African American community had to fight for quality education in the city. The dual school system created disparities in facilities, grounds, architectural design, and size. However, the school provided a rigorous curriculum and an extraordinary faculty because of the limited professional opportunities for African Americans. Okay. So clearly, he is correct, at least on some level, because here in Wikipedia, which is not necessarily a right wing bias, it is telling us that it provided A, rigorous curriculum, and then B, they had an extraordinary faculty. Now, let's go down a little bit further here. Notable alumni. We've got people that we've got Sadie Tanner, who was the first African American to earn a PhD in economics and the first admitted to the Pennsylvania bar. And I'm not going to read all these. I just want to read a couple of these. We've got Mary P. Burrell, who is a playwright and educator. Ford Dabney, a ragtime pianist, composer, jazz band leader. By the way, if you've never heard ragtime, you should listen to it. I think it's actually wonderful. We've got Benjamin O. Davis Sr., first African American U.S. Army general officer. We've got Charles Hamilton Houston, civil rights attorney. We've got another playwright down here, Willis Richardson. We've got a modernist architect, Hilliard Robinson. And then we've got educators, we've got jazz band leaders, cabinet secretaries. So we've got Robert C. Weaver, who was the first African American cabinet secretary, the first United States Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. So what is this telling us, folks? What this is saying is that for 80 years, a school that was chronically underfunded, they had to fight for every resource that they could get. They were able to produce quality graduate students. And it was known that they produced great results. I believe, if I remember, and I was trying to do some of my research and I couldn't find this, but I'm pretty sure in past times when I read this, that out of four schools, three of them being put that up there, three of them being uh, schools for white students, and then this particular school being for African American students. Of those four, this school repeatedly outpaced the students in their academic scores and what they were able to achieve, outpaced their white counterparts. Now, when you do the research and you want to ask, well, how did they do that if they didn't have all this money? It was because one, they had a rigorous curriculum, and they had an extraordinary faculty. The standards that they held were serious. They said, hey, you're here to learn. You either learn or you get removed. Period. End of story. And there are other reasons. I'm not going to go into all the reasons, but what I wanted to point out again is that one, we need to be careful about our memes. When I saw this meme, I thought it was interesting. And again, I don't really, and I'm going to pull that up on the screen just in case anybody wants to see it one more time. So here's the meme that I saw. It says new Oregon law removes reading, writing, and math requirements to help students of color. I don't really care that the photo has nothing to do with this particular law. It's actually for another law regarding climate change. I don't really care about that simply because, again, this particular bill, when it was signed quietly, and the governor did not have a photo op like this to for people to utilize. So I'm okay with that. However, the meme itself is incorrect. The meme does it does not this law does not remove the requirements. What it does is it removes the testing requirement to show that you are proficient in these particular areas. And these are 9 essential skills that I put up on the screen. If you're just tuning in, make sure that you go back and you watch the prior those prior portions of this particular episode so that you can find out what those particular things are. So this bill, it just removes the proficiency requirements. And a lot of people, when you go through and you read some of these news articles regarding this particular bill, they have pointed out that this was necessary because there are disparities that they see with the education system, and I am not disputing the disparities. I think that they are there. In fact, let's pull up the AP article that I was reading that I showed earlier. It says Rochelle, I think that's yeah, Rochelle Chase, founder of MXM Block, an advocacy group led by Black women and focused on education and other social justice issues, said certain children struggle with exams and had been hurt by the testing requirements. But again, if we look at the M Street School and the history, and we're not talking about 1 year, we're talking an 80-year period, roughly 80 years that they consistently produced quality students with whatever testing requirements they had, and they did it while they were underfunded. 80 years is a trend. If we picked out 1 year and said, look, this school had 1 year, that would be cherry picking information. But when you pick out 80 years, you have a long term trend because you can actually go back and you can look and say, what were the students learning and what were the scores over time? Because every single year you have new students. So you have 80 different groups of students who were successful in their education and then went on to be successful in their endeavors afterward. So then it goes on to say here, and I think they're quoting Rochelle Chase here. It says, under the best of circumstances, in totally normal times with no pandemic, there are a number of children who don't test well. Jay said, including the children of color, including children of color, those in need of special education, low income students, and early language learners. She added that it's, quote, not a deficit on the part of those children. I actually agree with that. It is not a deficit on the part of those children. It's a deficit on the adults who are teaching them. Because again, if we go back and we look at schools that were successful in times when they were underfunded, then we can see that there is a distinct difference in the approach to the education system and the quality of the teachers that were teaching them. So I actually disagree that this law is useful. I think it will make things worse. In fact, let's take a look at this. All right. So what I'm showing here is a report card. This is the nation's report card. And we can see, and let me see, can I make this a little bigger? Let's make this a wee bit bigger. How's that? Okay, that looks much better. All right, so this is you can find any number of different report cards for different states. This one had some some graphics that I thought went well when I was doing some of my research. So we look down here and we say in 2022. Now this is 1 year after they suspended the requirements. The average score of fourth grade students in Oregon was 228. This was lower than the average score of 235 for public school students in the nation. And we can see right over here, it's got a little graph, or a little graph, 0 to 500, and we're below. We're not even halfway. Okay, we're at 228, and it was below the average score of 235. We scroll down a little bit further here, and we've got some charts. Oregon performance trends. Now, it doesn't have it for grade 12, but it does have it for grade 8. And we can see that we've got math, reading, science, and writing. And we can see that it looks like science kind of stayed a little bit the same, whereas math and reading are down. And for whatever reason, they're not recording writing. So let's take a look at math, and it goes over time. We can see that over time, Oregon went up from the 90s, from the early 90s. They were low, and then they went up, and then they started going back down. They started coming back down around 20, somewhere between 2013 and 2017. You start seeing this trend of, kind of stagnation a little bit. And then they start dropping in 2019. And then they dropped yet again further in 2022. So, what is this telling us? This is telling us that whatever they did didn't work. It didn't even improve, right? And we can see this for all of them. Reading, yeah, reading. Reading, we see the same thing here. We kind of kind of going along, not really going up or down much, but then we see the downward trend again starting in 2017, going down, and now we're again down in 2022, and it looks like 2022 is the lowest that it's been in about a decade. Okay, so they've went down. And then if we want to look at a news article, this comes from OregonLive.com. So let's take a look at this. All right, and let's see. Let's make sure that's a little bit bigger there. All right, is that too big? All right, that's on the screen. Okay, Oregon school performance craters. Okay, okay, craters relative to national averages. Elementary and middle school math scores rank sixth worst in the U.S. The worst in the U.S. And this was this came out in October of 2022, so roughly about a year ago. And so we're not going to read any of the article, but here's the problem. The problem is that the government came in and they said, "Hey, we've identified a problem," which I agree. There is a legitimate problem here. You have school scores that are not meeting, that are not impressive, right? They need to be improved. And then they come out and they say, "Well, we need some more equity. We need some more inclusivity. So we're going to suspend this requirement in hopes that things will get better, or at least long enough for us to evaluate and determine what the cause may be." But the problem is they continue to get worse. So they're harming students while they're trying to figure out what's going on. I think this is an issue. And I think that Oregon needs to step back and they need to reevaluate what they're doing, the adults. And I think that what they would find if they started comparing and saying, well, do we have any evidence of other schools anywhere that are underfunded that were able to perform? If we do, and they do, then what was it about those schools that we can learn our lessons from? And I think that when you look at the M Street School as a great example, because again, it spanned an 80-year spanned for about 80 years producing quality students who went on to do, there were a lot of first, there were a lot of achievements, not only in college, but also in the real world. That's what we want to find. That's the results that we want to see happen. And we have examples of that. And what they did is they didn't screw around and say, well, maybe it's the testing, maybe some kids just don't do so well. No, they said, we're going to set a bar. It's going to be high, and we're going to expect the students to meet it. But not only that, we're going to expect a high bar from our educators. So our educators are not going to get to sleep with students and do all this crazy stuff that we see now. They are there to educate. So anyway, folks, that's what I've got. I just kind of wanted to go over this bill review, for Oregon's, it's Senate Bill 744. It was out of, it was back in 2021. The meme was slightly inaccurate, but I think it led to an interesting conversation that I was able to have here. So I hope you enjoyed that portion of it. And, I really want to thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I want you to be sure to catch me every morning, Monday through Friday at 7 a.m. Early 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for an informed discussion on politics and culture. And I want to throw out a quick shout out here to Austin Peterson, who, if you watched my show Friday, that was the first show for early mornings. On Thursday, he tweeted out something that basically gave me a little bit of motivation. You can go back and you can listen to that episode, or you can watch that episode where I kind of discuss it and I show what he did. But I want to give Austin a little bit of credit for kind of giving me that nudge that I needed to say, all right, I'm going to start getting up Monday through Friday. Son. Somebody's excited for the day. So I want to give him credit for kind of just motivating me to say, all right, I'm going to do it. I'm going to make it happen come heck or high water. Got to say that because I got little ears here. But anyway, to continue on, I want you to be sure to do all the proper audience actions. Subscribe to my YouTube channel over at youtube.libertydad.com. Ring the bell, like videos, and maybe even drop a word or two in the comment section. If you want to follow me on social media, you can do so at Liberty Dad on Facebook, Liberty Dad Pod on Twitter, or email me old school, libertydadpodcast@gmail.com, because I would love to hear from you. And remember, if you're a champion of liberty, your business is people and your product is liberty. Have a great day. Catch you tomorrow, and I'm out.